I believe during Juneteenth there needs to be an intentionality amongst all people to celebrate African American culture.
This week on Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News,
Juneteenth to me, it means family.
Exploring the history, culture, and celebrations of Juneteenth.
We are just a gumbo pot of wonderful.
We're having a real talk about how our community is recognizing a holiday that marks the end of enslavement and how some use this time to reflect on Black achievements.
Welcome to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith. Each week in a partnership between Denver7 and CPR, we have a real talk about issues impacting underrepresented people across Colorado and amplifying voices you may not always hear.
That's right. June 19th marks nearly 160 years since all enslaved people in the United States were set free in 1865. But that's 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation legally ended slavery in Confederate states.
Taking a look back on the now recognized federal holiday, Juneteenth is when more than 250,000 enslaved people in Texas were told they were now free by executive decree, a day we now celebrate throughout the country.
Several neighborhoods in Denver and Aurora will host events. Since long before the federal holiday was created, Denver's been home to one of the biggest Juneteenth celebrations in the country in the historic Black neighborhood of 5 Points.
So joining us now is Norman Harris. He is the founder of the Juneteenth Music Festival. Thanks so much for being with us today,
Thank you
Norman.
so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Norman, Denver's Juneteenth was started in the 1950s by a business owner who moved from Texas to Denver. What was happening in 5 Points, Denver's historically Black neighborhood, that made it the time and the place to really formally start the celebration?
You know, I think it was a really unique situation as African Americans were traveling from south to north and from urban or rural to urban. They brought with them quite a few traditions. Here in Denver, the African American community was only really allowed to live in 5 Points. And so what really happened was a concentration of our people, but also culture and traditions that came from the South and from those rural areas. So 5 Points became just a tremendous neighborhood, not only for culture, but for housing celebrations like Juneteenth.
Yeah, it was a safe space, right? It was a safe space. You couldn't live outside this line, the red line that everyone talks about.
Yeah,
right?
it really was a city within the city.
Yeah.
And so what you got was just quite a few unique businesses and a celebration like Juneteenth that really sprouted from, you know, a lot of the tragedy that our country produced through slavery.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned something, a city within a city. That really sings to me because even since I've moved to Denver, 5 Points has called to me, if you will. I do know in 1980s, 90s, 5 Points started to shrink just a little bit. Redlining started to end and we started to see a spreading out, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw this type of phenomenon happening all throughout urban centers throughout United States. I think they called it like urban decay. And
right.
So, you know, there were folks who felt necessary to move to other neighborhoods. And with that, you know, I do believe that the neighborhood did see a decline.
Juneteenth was still happening, but not on such a large scale at this time, right?
Well, I'd say that it probably reached its peak attendance in like the mid-90s, where there were hundreds of thousands of people that would pack the streets of 5 Points to celebrate Juneteenth. But really, I think that's around the time when the celebration started to experience some of the challenges with violence, and just, you know, that also plagued those urban centers that I was talking about, not only in Denver, but in cities across our country.
But you came along in 2012, right, and relaunched this Juneteenth into a music festival, right?
Yeah, well, I've been going to Juneteenth since I can remember. Yeah. So, but yeah, you know, myself and, you know, a crew of just really dedicated folks who love the neighborhood and love our culture, you know, felt that the celebration deserved a new trajectory. So we rebranded it from Juneteenth to Juneteenth Music Festival and really found a way to re-engage the city with the importance of the holiday.
What inspired you to do this, though? I know you said you've been going since as far back as you can remember, but what was in you that made you say, I need to be the one to bring this back to what it should be?
You know, that's a great question. I think we just, you know, I personally just saw a lot of opportunity. You know, those memories as a child, some of my best memories growing up running up and down the street, going to places like Capri Chicken and getting hot links from vendors and a carnival. Those are all things that just, when I look back, were memories that kind of helped define my childhood. And so as a young adult, seeing that the festival needed a resurgence of energy, it felt natural to try to be a part of it.
Are you surprised by the turnout since then? Are you surprised that folks inside and outside the African American community say, this is a major festival, I want to be there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of work. You know, I think if you could have been there in 2012, you know, those crowds weren't quite to where they are now. But, you know, I really credit that to, again, like the dedication, the hard work of our community, understanding that this is a tradition that needed to live on.
I know we talk a lot about the celebration and the vendors, and I mean, there's so much beauty within Juneteenth and the Juneteenth Music Festival in particular. Is there more to it though? Is there more to why we feel this need to just come together and recognize this holiday?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting and something that we need to explore with it now being a federal holiday is we have the opportunity to define what that means to our country. And I believe during Juneteenth there needs to be an intentionality amongst all people to celebrate African American culture. And if that means going out and supporting a black business or going out and supporting a black artisan or whatever that means, we need to be intentional to understand that this is our country's, hasn't always fully acknowledged the impacts of slavery. And the fact that, it took 2 years between 1863 and 1865 for African Americans to be freed in the South, and for throughout my whole life, Juneteenth wasn't ever in a textbook. It really kind of displays that our country still has a lot of work to do in terms of equity and understanding the impacts that inequality has had on all people.
What does Juneteenth mean to Norman Harris, to you?
Juneteenth is like a child now in terms of, or a teenager. I just love it. I love seeing the people come together, the challenges to bring it all together. And when you're standing on the corner of 27th and Welton, you see the parade coming in, or you see some of your favorite musicians on the stage, or you see Micah and Big J who are hosts. I think it's just a real reflection of like our community's best. So it's so exciting that we are able to kind of kick off the summer with so much good energy and so much good love and so much dedication and intentionality in celebrating Black culture.
It is an absolutely beautiful time. Norman Harris, organizer of the Juneteenth Music Festival, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Beyond festivities, Juneteenth is also about celebrating Black achievements.
Coming up, we introduce you to the founder of one program working to raise up the next generation of leaders. This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Denver7's Micah Smith.
And I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Heffel.
Celebrating Juneteenth and the true start of freedom for all enslaved people in the U.S. also means looking at achievements that impact Black communities.
One person who spends her life advocating and amplifying Black voices in power is Median Holmes. Median founded the Denver-based organization called Epitome of Black Excellence and Partnership, which creates programs to develop Black leaders.
As a single mom, Median wanted the best education for her 3 children. So, using the power of her voice, she forged partnerships and relationships with both her kids' school and other parents, empowering each to work together. Now she does this on a grander scale.
Median joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
How does your advocacy work tie into the spirit of Juneteenth?
When I think about the work that I do and the partnerships that I create in the midst of it, it really is, I think, a testament of what our ancestors did during the times in which they had to endure unjustified resilience. When you talk about overcoming the tortures of enslavement through the Underground Railroad, the trust that had to be built, and the leadership that was sitting right in the midst of that community, I think that's what the tie is. The work that I do with the Epitome of Black Excellence and Partnership, we do just that. We reap what our ancestors have sowed. And so when we talk about our programming, we restore, elevate, acknowledge, and protege, REAP. We reap what our ancestors have sowed. So with that being said, it's a direct tie into who we are and what we were conditioned to be.
Yeah.
When you talk about who we are, you talk about our ancestors, I immediately think about motherhood. And I know that you have said motherhood was really the start of your advocacy work. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Absolutely. So I would say for me, motherhood was the season where my advocacy grew up. That's where it maturated. And it really was coming from my history. I'm a product of DPS. I'm a proud graduate of Montbello High School. And I remember growing up, and 80239 was a zip code that had a stigma sitting over it like a cloud. And that carried through my adulthood. And so when I became a mother, I refused to accept that narrative for my children. And so with that, I was able to leverage that passion, that love that I had for them. And I turned it into just simply being a mom that wanted to ensure that her children were set up for success. And so as I used my voice, I started to realize that in that classroom, all of a sudden, things were changing not just for my child, but for the children that sat in front of them, behind them, on the sides of them. So that's really the motherhood for me, is where my advocacy grew up. And it really is a pull on the women that conditioned me to go from up next to up now.
The web address for your organization is called Be the Epitome. I love that. Can you go into what that means for you?
Absolutely. For me, when we grounded ourselves in how we were going to name this work, we started with the thought of it being the Center for Black Excellence and Partnership, but then it sounded like a building. So we said, no, this is bigger. This is a movement. And so when we were able to settle on the epitome, we said, well, what's the call to action? We are calling people to become the epitome. Be the epitome of what you know is right. Be the epitome of equity. Be the epitome of freedom.
Because that hits right inside your heart, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Mandian, let's talk about some of the programs at the Epitome of Black Excellence and the needs that they're addressing.
Absolutely. So the way that we designed our programs, really it's designed around supporting Black excellence in our community in so many different facets. And so when we talk about Black leaders in any industry, you can likely look at their leadership journey and they'll tell you that they're tired. They are tired, there's exhaustion, not only from the natural components of being a leader, but there's layers of systemic barriers. There's layers of things that happen because they sit in their beautiful Black skin. So with that, we really lean into protecting the narrative of identifying ways in which we can uplift Black excellence, and we protect that narrative responsibly. And that's the reason why it's the epitome of Black excellence and partnership, because we also believe in the collective body of ensuring that we're curating leaders. So when we lean in, we are looking for leaders and members of community, and from the spectrum of from the youngest to the oldest. And we really say, do you feel unprotected? Do you feel unseen? Do you feel unleveraged? And if you do, that's where our program is identifying ways in which we can create a different path.
So if someone comes to you and says, I feel this way, how do you help them maybe get over that in that sense? And that's such a loaded question, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And so the beauty is that it's not cookie cutter. So really what we do is we open up the journal of their leadership. We open up the journal of the moment that they're in. This could be a moment that requires rapid response, and we might be saying, hey, we need to help you to survive this moment and thrive beyond it. Or it can just simply be someone that says, I just need to linger in my leadership. I need to identify ways in which I can understand who I am and be equipped to ensure that I'm helping others understand what I bring to the table through cultural capital. So it's a really amazing opportunity for leaders to linger in who they are, and then also to have a lever to pull when they are under attack.
You said two things that are really sticking with me. Asking, do you feel unprotected? Such an important question, but also the statement, I just need to linger in my leadership. How do you encourage people to do that? How are you able to support them while they do linger in their leadership?
Absolutely. So what we do is we have a lot of curriculum that creates thought provocation. And when you do that, when you're provoking thought, that really is how you make things homegrown. So when we come to individuals and say it's time to linger, that's an invitation for them to sit in a space where this is pouring into you. You do not have to show up to be on. You do not have to show up to give us anything. We are going to pour into you, and we are going to challenge you to ensure that you are making this something that's your own. So we really support them in understanding just taking time for your leadership to ensure that you're healthy, that's going to curate healthy relationships and make you a more healthy leader.
All right, we only have a few more seconds left, but I have to ask all of our guests this today. What does Juneteenth mean to Median?
My goodness, Juneteenth to me, in the simplest form, it means family. That is what Juneteenth means to me. So for me, just like a lot of other African Americans in this country, Juneteenth has always been there. It's been something that we have celebrated. And when I say family, I'll say that for the Black community, we've always been collective. So family has never been limited to your bloodline. So when Juneteenth happens, we're all family. And that's what it means to me.
We are all a family. Well, Median Holmes, founder of Epitome of Black Excellence and Partnership, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Thank you again.
Across the country, Juneteenth events are filled with musicians and artists.
So, as an artist, does this day take on special meaning? That's after the break. This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Haffel.
And I'm Denver7's Micah Smith.
We're having a real talk about Juneteenth and how the U.S. holiday is celebrated, which got us thinking if artists see this pivotal moment in history as something more.
Award-winning poet Dominique Christina has had a glittering career. She holds 5 National Poetry Slam titles. She's currently the arts envoy to the country of Cyprus through the U.S. State Department. And she says her inspiration for her poetry comes from her family's legacy rooted in the civil rights movement.
Dominique joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So when you think about Juneteenth and its history, do you feel a personal connection?
Well, yeah. I don't know how I couldn't. You know, I've inherited a very specific set of circumstances in my family of origin. My Aunt Carlotta, you know, desegregated Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, is the recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor for that. So I was born into a context in which being a wise student of history was a prerequisite.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And I will tell you, I've had the honor of meeting your aunt.
Yeah.
She is amazing.
She's phenomenal.
So grateful for her incredible sacrifice to push our country forward. I know that you've performed at various Juneteenth events in New York, DC, New Orleans. What was that experience like?
It's different everywhere. You know, we are not a monolith, as you know. We are expressive and expansive. We are also bruised and trying. We're musical. We're theatrical, we're healing. We are just a gumbo pot of wonderful. So every city has a different expression, you know, a different way to celebrate Juneteenth. But obviously what undergirds it is the fact that the history says you did not know, you were liberated. And when you found out, that was worthy of praise. So that's the piece.
Wow.
Yeah.
Power. You said a lot there. The gumbo reference, you didn't know you were liberated. It's just seeping into my soul right now. Yes.
When you're on your own, how do you celebrate Juneteenth?
Yeah, I think it's the same way I celebrate waking up every morning. I will never stop being grateful for the people who preceded me, the sacrifices that they made, the sacrifices that they're still making, the roadways they built so that I could walk on with bare feet. I'm just always aware of the sacrifices, the seismic offerings of the people who came before us that made our present reality possible. So celebrating Juneteenth for me is simply the opportunity to remember, to acknowledge, to name, and to say amen.
Is there pain there as well?
Yeah, because folks languished.
Yeah.
Because they bled, and because they bled needlessly. They bled needlessly from the beginning of that experiment, right? So the idea that there were folk who still toiled and didn't know, had not been told that they had been emancipated, of course, it carries a particular wound, a particular bruising, and a particular lamentation. But that is when, to me, we're invited to, one, acknowledge that, but then also celebrate how they got lifted out. So that's where I try to focus my attention. You could dwell in the wounds and in the pain, but there's no point in that. And I don't think our history or the evidence of our being here embodies that at all.
I love how you pay reverence to our ancestors, but also the celebratory nature of how they got lifted out. You were a finalist for Colorado Poet Laureate. Let's talk about pushing forward. Do you think your career has inspired young people for the next generation as we do look forward?
I hope so. That's the feedback I get. I really hope so. I'm just honored. I'm honored to occupy the space. I'm honored to be in the service of my gifts. I had a grandmother who didn't get the opportunities that I have, who wasn't invited into the same spaces that I'm invited in. And she bore all of these gifts. She was just as miraculous. She was just as impossible. But the state of the world and our country specifically, we just weren't ready yet for her kind of brilliance. But mine is more welcome. People invite me into things, give me the opportunity to be in the service of my gifts, and so I'll spend the rest of my life operating in gratitude for that. Yeah.
All right, now I want to ask you if you'll perform a piece of your work for us and tell us where the inspiration is coming from before you jump in.
Yeah, it's celebration. It's about praise. It's just an opportunity to just carve out a minute and say thank you. I have done amazing things, you know?
All right.
So, praise poem. For the gathered faithful, the ones whose blood moves relentlessly on, and for the ones who wish to be important and the ones who know they already are. For the ones who've craned their necks over the sharp edges of midnight, who dream their lives can be fat with future, delicious with possible, a sizzle and a rumble in the place we call tomorrow. For the ones who were never told that they are worthy of every good and perfect thing, the ones who hustle and scrape to keep their back straight. I know it's not easy. I know how hard you try. Listen. You're not charity cases, not victims, not history's bad luck accident. So to the holding on ones, the deliberate ones, the trying ones, just praise. Praise your body and the way you woke up this morning. Praise the miracle and the mess. Praise the language you were born with and the ones you're learning. Praise the opening of the gate. Praise the child you were and the adult you're becoming. Praise the becoming. Praise the journey. Praise the fight. Praise the wherewithal. Praise the riding of wind without asking permission. And praise the otherworldly algorithm that is your heart, especially that. Revolution is the sound of your heart still beating. So praise. Thank you.
Dominique, Christina, that was absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
Real Talk viewers and listeners, that was a treat.
Yeah.
All right, award-winning poet Dominique Christina, thank you so much for joining us for this Real Talk.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is this week's episode of Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Every week, we'll be having a real talk on issues that impact Coloradans who are often overlooked.
You can find all of our shows on denver7.com/realtalk or at cpr.org/realtalk. Have a great day.